Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. If you joined us earlier for our separate Canal Corp meeting or Joint Finance Committee meeting, this is the first bit of a historic day and moment, the first joint meeting of the New York Power Authority as well as the Canal Corporation board. So welcome. One and all, welcome my fellow trustees, Nicandri and McKibben, with me here, Cress and Pacente via video in separate locations. Also want to welcome, as always, Gil and his executive team, able-bodied and ready to rock and roll on now the broader scale and scope of the combined organizations. As always, this meeting has been scheduled and duly noticed under the open meeting laws, and with that preamble and babble, I'm pleased to call the joint meeting of the Power Authority and Canal Corporation to order. We've all had an opportunity to review the agenda, and unless there's any proposed amendments to it, I'd ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second. Have a motion, have a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. The motion carries. As is customary, we will start our meeting in executive session and resume within the next hour. If I can, I'd ask for a motion, therefore, to convene an executive session pursuant to the Public Officers Law of the State of New York, Sections 105F, to discuss the financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation.
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. We'll now convene in executive session. We'll be back with all of you, as said, within the next hour. Thanks very much. Welcome back, everyone. We were reasonably close to our suggested hour executive session, so I appreciate your patience and happy to have you rejoin us here. Again, trustees McKibben and Nicandri with me, trustees Cress and Pacente, along with Brian and John from Canal are with us via video. So welcome back, everyone, as well as Gil and the extended team. If I can, let's officially restart with a motion to resume the meeting in open session.
Second.
So moved and seconded. All in favor, aye. Aye. Motion carried. All right. In the previous agenda that was circulated, we had Finance Committee report. We're going to defer that and bring that back a little bit later in the agenda. So I'll start with a motion to approve the consent agenda. If everyone's had a chance to review that, unless you have any other questions, I'd ask for a motion to.
So moved.
All right. Have a
Second.
motion. Second,
Second.
Tony. Thank you very much. Any questions of anyone in any of the materials covered in consent? All right. All in favor? Aye.
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 Motion carried. In terms of contractors, probably should have got this out of order. Everybody's otherwise previously reported, and conflicts, I think we're good. Nobody's got any changes to any of that, correct? All right, excellent. Great. Okay, what we're going to start with is kind of the state of the world of energy. So we're pleased to have Energy Czar Richard Kaufman with us, and Gil, I'll let you handle introductions. Yep. But the two of you are going to give us an overview of the bigger picture of the world of energy across the state, the relevance of the NYPA, and leading the charge there, and have a bit of a discussion to orient us in 17 as we look ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and trustees. Good morning, and the viewing public. Today we're fortunate to have with us Richard Kaufman. Richard Kaufman is the chairman of Energy and Finance, a cabinet position under Governor Andrew Cuomo. As you had mentioned, we affectionately call him the Energy Czar of New York State. And he is also the chairman of our sister authority, NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. He is the architect of the governor's energy policy agenda, also known as REV, Reforming the Energy Vision, which is really now internationally known as the most innovative energy policy to change the way we produce, we distribute, and use energy. He oversees and coordinates the activities of all New York State energy agencies and authorities, including NYPA, the Long Island Power Authority, NYSERDA, as I had mentioned, and the Public Service Commission. Under his leadership, the state created an energy plan, one of the most forward-looking and aggressive energy plan. And let me just say the end goals of that plan: 40% greenhouse gas emission reductions relative to 1990 levels by 2030, a mandate that 50% of our generation of electricity must come from renewable energy by 2030, and a 23% decrease in energy consumption in buildings across the state in New York relative to their use in 2012 levels. So with that, I give you Richard Kaufman.
It seems like we should be applauding.
Right, exactly. Richard's like, is that me?
That was a frank applause. So Richard, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Gil, for that kind introduction. I want to thank the trustees for your service on behalf of the governor. NYPA has always been an important asset for the people of New York, and ever more important given the changes that we are in the middle of in New York State energy policy that is called REV, Reforming the Energy Vision. So Gil asked me to come and give a perspective of where we are, and I'm not going to talk explicitly about NYPA until the end, but there are many things that I'm going to say that NYPA, in terms of the environment, that NYPA is already reacting to. So when I talk about utilities, I'm talking about not NYPA specifically, but the other utilities in the state. Okay. Well, I've already failed the intelligence test. Okay. So about 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago, I got a call from the governor after Sandy, and he talked about the power sector in the state, talked about utilities being vinyl records in the age of the iPad. And he was principally focused on resilience at that point. Now, the interesting thing about the utility industry, it talks about being 99 point whatever % resilient, but the way that the utility industry keeps score is that doesn't take into account major storms. So it's very resilient. The system is very resilient until it's not, and then it's not resilient really at all. So business as usual is not sustainable from a resiliency standpoint given the frequency and magnitude of storms. The current system is not adequately addressing emissions. It's not responsive to changing customer needs, individual, corporate, and community desires for more control over their energy, better power quality, and greener energy, cleaner energy. And these distributed solutions, in many cases, are getting cheaper and cheaper, which takes us to the last point about business as usual. Business as usual is not sustainable economically. The system is getting more and more expensive, and we already have 1 million people in New York that are having difficulty paying their power bills. So why, I want to talk about this issue of affordability. Why is it that the system is getting more and more expensive? Because we know that with the benefits of natural gas, generation costs, we've talked about this many times, I'm sure, here at NYPA, wholesale power costs are low. But the costs of transmission and distributing this power continue to increase. So the end effect on customers has continued to be an increase in costs. So what's going on? Well, some of it is that we have an old system in New York State. After all, it kind of started here. But in the last 10 years, we spent $17 billion on the whole system in New York State, headed to $30 billion in the next 10 years. And this is not making the system more resilient or smarter. It's just replacing the infrastructure that we already have. The other reason why it's getting more and more expensive is the system is getting peakier and peakier. So the system has had to build for this peak. And this is, as Gil said in earlier points, this is the grid of Tesla and Westinghouse. And it's expensive because we're continuing to build this grid and rebuild this grid over and over again. This is the grid that has large power plants at one end through long-distance transmission into a distribution system to customers. Electrons flow in one direction, and the supply is based upon a fixed demand. And then what we've been doing on this system, which was never designed for renewable resources or distributed resources, physically was never designed for that. We've been bolting on distributed resources onto this grid that was never designed for these purposes. And it's been good for those customers. You know, they can get, in some cases, lower costs, better resilience, better power quality. But the question is, it's been good for them, but has it been good for all customers? And this is at the root of the net metering debates that you've been reading about around the country. So for all these reasons, the governor asked us to start from scratch, as it were, and to come up with a new policy that we call REV, Reforming the Energy Vision. And the nice thing about this policy is we believe that it's pro-growth, pro-consumer, and pro-environment. And we're now about 4 years into it, so we're certainly not done, but we can start pointing to very tangible things that have happened as a result of changing direction and policy. So as Gil said, these are our energy goals: 50% renewables, 40% greenhouse gas reductions, and 23% efficiency, all by 2030. But I want to make this very clear. Under REV, this is not, your father's old approach. We are not going to be able to achieve these goals on a cost-effective basis if we just keep doing things the way that we were doing them. And so it is part of rebuilding a different kind of system. That's how we're going to do it. And the new system that we're going to build, and another way of thinking about REV, is to change the financial incentives of both the utilities and competitive markets to drive capital to build this grid of tomorrow. The grid of tomorrow, which is a hybrid system, still going to have large power plants, still going to have a strong backbone and transmission, but it's also going to have distributed resources that are integrated into the system, electrons that flow in more than one direction, and supply and demand that are dynamic. So there are certainly technology issues, and I'm not a technology guy, so I can sort of minimize them. But no, I know there are technology issues, but fundamentally we think that what is preventing us, or what has prevented us from building this grid, and you've seen this picture many times before, is less the technology and more about the policies and regulatory constraints that have been put in place that have really, as I said before, really have resulted in us rebuilding the 20th century grid as opposed to building the 21st century grid. And that's really what REV is to do. Every day, utilities spend money, and we want to direct the flow of capital so that the grid starts getting, this new grid starts getting built. So, let's talk about how we can achieve our goals. Well, this chart about energy efficiency, that's really not new to you or most people. The grid was never designed to be energy efficient. We've had plenty of fossil fuels. So the fact that you start out with 100 units of energy content with a big power plant, and a lot of it goes up the chimney in the form of waste heat. You wind up with an incandescent bulb with two units left. That's not a surprise. That's not a surprise. What is a surprise, I think, to people that look at this industry from a financial point of view is how financially inefficient the system is. So this is one measure that its average capacity utilization is 54%. So it's built for the hottest days of the year, sometimes the hottest hours of the year, but we pay for it all year long. In other industries that are capital intensive, and we certainly have seen this in New York State, in the last 35 years, in order for capital intensive industries to remain competitive in a global world, they have had to significantly improve their capital efficiency through changes in technology, changes in business model, changes in financial incentives. This has not happened to the power sector because the power sector has been protected by regulation. And so, in fact, sort of the world upside down, because in other industries, it's been the way for survival has been to be capital efficient. In the utility sector, utilities get paid financially. Their financial incentives have been about quantum of capital deployed, not efficiency of capital deployed. So it's the world backwards through the other way around through the telescope. Another way of looking at this financial inefficiency is to look at a customer bill. So pretend this is a customer bill. So the utility profit of on the customer bill, I'm not talking about returns, I'm just saying what is the quantum of profit that the utility earns on the customer bill is 3 to 4%. Now, in every other business that you know of, that 96 to 97% would be thought of as a wallet share, an opportunity to reduce cost for customers or improve value and earn some for the company itself. That has not been an opportunity for utilities. It's not been a driver for innovation in the sector. You think about in other industries how there's been rapid adoption of IT. Well, most IT or a lot of IT or a lot of great technology isn't capital for a utility, and therefore there's no profit opportunity. Or if it is capital and displaces traditional capital, in the past there's been a financial incentive to deploy it. In other industries, R&D is an opportunity to create innovation. In New York State, 0.2% of revenue, 0.2% of revenue is what's spent in R&D. This is not a fault of the utility industry. This is a fault of policies which surround utilities. The point about investing in R&D would be to try to unlock the 96 to 97% of the customer bill that would provide more value for customers and an opportunity for utilities to make more money in a different kind of business model. So I'll give you an example here, not far from here, in Brooklyn, Queens, an area of load growth. And the traditional way of approaching load growth in this area would have been to build a $1.2 billion substation that probably would have had average capacity utilization of about 54%, like the system as a whole. But instead, under our policy, Con Ed went out to the market with what were alternatives, what they call non-wires alternatives. What could the market come back with instead of a $1.2 billion substation that would solve the problem of load growth in this area? And what came back were a series of alternatives that were solar, cogen, energy efficiency that in the aggregate cost $200 to $300 million instead of $1.2 billion. So all customers save money because there's less capital deployed. All customers save money because there's less peak power purchased, and it's cleaner too. And while this sort of 1.0 isn't perfect, there's enough value that's been saved that the utility can earn an equivalent return had they made the same large investment. So we know this can be done, and the same idea has now been replicated with some other utilities across the state. So we know we can build a system that can be both cleaner and cheaper, as opposed to just bolting things on to the old system. And the great thing is that we have lots of areas in the state where there are these grid constraints, as in, you can imagine how difficult it is to bring power into New York City in the summertime. And we've had an opportunity to develop, the state has helped create opportunities for microgrid projects, a challenge, a competition to earn for communities to organize themselves. And you see that there have been many across the state. This is called New York Prize. It was a $40 million fund to fund competition for large-scale microgrids, and it's just the study, not for $40 million is not going to fund a microgrid. And we expected a couple dozen communities to submit proposals. We received over 150. We funded 83. And the early view is several will be financeable without public support, because these little grids, these microgrids, and they're bigger than a campus, because they're going to be located in areas of grid constraint. Not only will they be able to provide resilience to those communities and be able to island off in the event of emergency, the rest of the time they're going to be provided services to the grid as a whole. And it's going to be, and as a result, because they're going to, similar to that BQDM example, because they'll be, it will result, they will result in financial and energy benefits to the grid as a whole. So the next phase of this will be as soon as next month for the next phase of awards, and phase 3 will be later this year. So one of the things, and there are many different parts of how you get this REV thing to work. One is to start mobilizing communities and develop these microgrids. Another is to try to determine what's the value of a distributed energy resource. And so this will be coming by later this year through the Public Service Commission, so that we can start deploying distributed resources more and more in those locations where those resources have the most value, as opposed to them just being bolted on wherever onto the system. Another thing that's the way we're talking about trying to change business model, culture, and attitudes of the utilities, because none of this, you can change the rules, but doesn't mean that things are going to happen overnight, is through demonstration projects. And there were a dozen demonstration projects that were announced last year, but the utilities need a front door to innovation. And the innovative companies that have been increasingly interested in coming to New York also need a way to connect to utilities. So that's something that the state is prepared to do, and we have built a front door with a consulting firm called Rev Connect, and so there'll be more and more projects, demonstration projects that will be happening later this year. Offshore wind, Governor made an announcement a couple weeks ago, 2.4 gigawatt goal by 2030. The NYPA signed a PPA also, I guess, last week for the first offshore wind project. And the benefit of offshore wind is it's close to population centers. And finally, the Clean Energy Standard. This is the means for the mechanism for developing large-scale renewables in the state, as well as for providing support for the upstate nuclear plants. You can see timing there, which finally leads me to the last slide. NYPA is helping REV already. We're tightly integrated. So I'm just going to highlight a few things that because we could talk for a long time, but just to give you a flavor of the ways in which NYPA can help REV. So I just talked about the Clean Energy Standard. The things that NYPA could do was, certainly NYPA has agreed to participate on behalf of the Power Authority customers to be part of the Clean Energy Standard. That's a huge contribution that NYPA and its customers are making on behalf of the people of New York. Prepaid PPAs is something that Bob Lurie is working on with his team. That's something that could significantly reduce the cost of renewables for customers. I talked before about the past financial disincentive for utilities to invest in technology. NYPA is doing a lot in technology, and it can be provide guidance to other utilities of how to deploy technology. So it's the GE partnership, it's the New York Energy Manager, NYPA is a test bed for energy efficiency technologies, and Built Smart. I could go on. But you can see that the industry has been starved in terms of adoption of new technology. And so it has to be more than just NYPA. It's NYPA as a way to leverage those experiences with utilities across the state. Building the transmission backbone, that is how NYPA kind of got started. And we have an old transmission system, but the transmission backbone that needs to be built has to be built in a way so that it can take into account the changing nature of infrastructure. So some of it's going to be more renewables, some of it's going to be more distributed solutions, some of it's going to have to involve connecting what's happening on the demand side to generation. And then customer solutions. NYPA has an opportunity to broaden the kinds of customer solutions that it can offer to customers. Customers are demanding it, to broaden its geographical scope to more customers. K-Solar is an example of the way in which NYPA can be more and more involved with different communities. Communities have much more interest in having, as you saw from the 150 communities that submitted proposals for community grids. Communities want to have more control over their energy. K-Solar is an example of how NYPA has already identified many communities across the state that are interested, but it's also partnering with NYSERDA on community-based activities because obviously there are constraints in terms of the kinds of customers NYPA can work with, but NYSERDA can then work with other customers in that community. So why don't I stop there, and thank you very much.
Gil, you want to try to offer your perspective there, and then we can have a bit of a discussion with both you and Richard relative to that?
Yes. So thank you, Richard. I'll do a couple of things. I'll hit two birds with one stone. I will kind of give you a review of what we did in 2016 that supports REV, as well as what we're thinking about going forward as a kind of response to what Richard just presented. So just very quickly, I'm not going to go through this. I just want to let you know that we were able to deliver the items that we promised the board in terms of advancing our strategic plan. Second, customer empowerment. What have we done? This is what we're calling our New York Energy Manager. It's located at SUNY Poly. This is if you look at it like a control center where we monitor the use of right now about 3,400 buildings, 1,200 real time. So what are we actually doing? We are putting sensors, smart meters, data acquisition devices at public buildings, for now state buildings, and basically creating a digital twin of those buildings. And we are getting that information. We know exactly how they use energy, lighting, HVAC, chiller, boilers, etc. And the goal are twofold. One is to help those buildings operate more efficiently and meet the goals of reducing energy consumption 20% by 2020. But more importantly, this location will be what I would call a digital foundry, meaning when we get all of this information from various type of buildings, I think we can scale over the next few years to about 20,000 buildings. So we'll have 20,000 twins, digital twins of buildings. Think of it as an iPhone. We're developing an iPhone with a standard application interface, and technology companies, hardware, software, utilities, the grid operator, researchers, PhD students can come in our NYPA's digital foundry to use the information, develop new products and services, not just for public sector buildings, but for the private sector and for utilities as we move to this, what Richard described as a more integrated, hybrid, distributed energy grid. So we're very, very excited. It's already up and running, as you can see, and already working, already saving money for government buildings. Customer empowerment, we continue our main mission, which is to help power the economic development of the state. We continue to allocate low-cost power across New York in return for job retention, job expansion, and capital commitments of those customers in New York State. In terms of infrastructure modernization, this is just one project. As you know, we're doing a lot of life extension and modernization of our power plants, such as our Lewiston pump generating unit in Niagara. But this is a smart grid technology called series compensation, which we apply to an existing transmission line from Albany, actually from the Utica area, to the lower Hudson Valley. And by applying the smart grid technology using the existing lines, we're able to push more power from upstate to downstate. And as you know, most of wind farms are located upstate, so it enables us to move those electrons to where the load centers are downstate. Very, very proud of this project. It's 440 megawatts of power, which is equivalent to a large power plant at a fraction of a cost. To build a 440 megawatt power plant is probably close to 800 million to $1 billion. This we're building at about 200 million in partnership with New York State Electric and Gas. We partnered with GE, another very unique partnership. When I talk about New York Energy Manager, I'm talking about creating digital twins of buildings. With our partnership with GE, we're creating digital twins of our power plants, of our substations. We have about 16 power plants, we have 24 substations, and our 1,400 circuit mile of transmission. What does that mean? We're putting sensors all over the place. We're putting data acquisition devices all over the place, streaming that information in. We're going to be building a smart operations center, integrated smart operations center on the 8th floor of this building. It will be like a big cockpit where we will monitor the real-time health of our equipment, power plant equipment, substation equipment, transmission system, so that we can perform intelligent asset management. So in the past, we would replace an equipment because the manual says after X amount of cycles or X amount of years, you have to replace that equipment. Now, we are going to maintain our asset based on the health of those specific equipment. So if the manual says replace it, but if our readings are such that the equipment is still good, we won't replace the equipment. Or if the equipment is prematurely deteriorating, even though it's not the right time to replace the equipment, we will replace the equipment early. I think by doing this, Richard talked about capital efficiency. We are going to optimize our capital investments and O&M investments into our own assets, aside from making our assets more controllable and smarter so that we can integrate renewable energy better into our transmission system. You know, wind and solar are variable generation sources, and it takes care, a little bit more complication to integrate them on the grid. By making our grid the smartest grid ever, that we are going to be able to do that. We are the only utility in the United States doing this with GE. In fact, doing this, period. We are the only utility that's digitizing our generation and transmission end-to-end, and we're very excited with this project. We already did our power plants in New York City. our combined cycle natural gas power plants. We're already streaming information. We're already finding efficiencies. We're already finding ways to improve the reliability of our system, et cetera. So we're just very, very excited. The integrated smart operations center will open before the end of this year on the 8th floor. Now, we're digitizing our customers on the New York Energy Manager on one side. We're digitizing our assets on the other side, but we're also addressing what I will call the in-between, NYPA's internal infrastructure and systems. Maximo, IBM Maximo, is an asset management tool. Mosaic is a human resources tool. Oracle Primavera is a project management tool. Ariba is a procurement supply chain tool. So we're also digitizing NYPA's internal processes and systems to make our operation and support services as effective and efficient as possible. With all of that, while we're making all these investments, integrating canals into our family, I'm happy to report that Moody's and S&P have both affirmed our plans for not only today's financial position, but our plan for future investments and our plan for future management, financial management of NYPA. So it speaks volume, and it tells that we have the capacity to implement the strategic plan that we have put forth. Us as an aside, we're a member of the communities where we have large facilities. We recently opened our Power Vista in Niagara. It is awesome. It is cool. We're driving a lot more tourists who go to Niagara Falls State Park. We created a hop-on, hop-off bus. And so this is going to be akin to, when people go to Las Vegas, families then take a side trip to Hoover Dam. What we want to happen is when people go to Niagara State Falls, that they would do a side trip to our Power Vista. And it's been great. We're working with the public school system in the area in terms of structured STEM programs for the kids in Niagara. Canals, I had mentioned, very short time frame, July to January to integrate canals. Great startup leadership from Bob Lurie and Tom Congadoro, and the entire team, and Kimberly Harriman took over and was her baby for a few months and really got that going with really no blips. Very, again, fantastic job to the entire team. There were hundreds of people at NYPA who were involved in the integration of canals, about 500 employees, many, many facilities, 524 miles of canals with various infrastructure. And now we are in the process of making sure that we operate the canal the way we operate the Power Authority. So, looking ahead, Richard mentioned a few of this in his presentation, but let me do a little bit of a deeper dive. NYPA, our goal is, if there's a theme, it's digital. We are betting big of making NYPA the first digital utility in the United States, maybe in the world. From NIAM to the predicts and all the digitization that we're doing inside our support infrastructure. That is to enhance productivity and competitiveness. Our generation business is competitive, and we believe by digitizing we can enhance productivity and be more competitive. We are going to reimagine the canals, find synergies for it to be more cost efficient, and also see whether there are opportunities, maybe not in all of the sections of the 524 miles, but in certain sections that can be used for tourism, recreation, water supply for farmers, etc. And I want to focus on, in terms of example, of I believe 2 business lines, Richard touched on this, that NYPA needs to launch or expand in a big way. First is transmission. We have proposals under a competitive process administered by the New York Independent System Operator and the Public Service Commission. So we have two proposals. A proposal in Western New York, because the coal plants in Western New York, Huntley and Dunkirk, are both retiring. The grid in Western New York need to be upgraded, and we partnered with New York State Electric and Gas to build a transmission system in Western New York. We'll find out, I think, sometime this year whether we will be selected in that project. We're hopeful. We believe that we have a great proposal there. It's also important because it makes sure that we can pump the power from the Niagara Power Project to the grid, and we can sell the output of that fully to the grid. The second proposal that we have on a competitive basis is between Albany and the lower Hudson Valley to bring more power from upstate to downstate, about 1,000 megawatts. And that project, we partnered with a private sector transmission developer called LS Power. So in this case, with NYSEG, regulated utility, on the other project with a private developer. And we're learning a lot on the difference between how private sector developer work versus regulated utility. And we believe also we have a great proposal there. So, you know, fingers crossed, we're optimistic. We're hoping that we will secure those projects through an RFP process conducted by the New York ISO and the state. And they are big projects. If we get one or two of this project, it will require a mobilization in Joe Kessler's group to start building and designing, building, permitting these projects. So that's one area. The other area that I believe NYPA ought to participate, Richard mentioned prepaid PPA and other types of facilitation to enable the financing, building of large-scale renewables is an area where NYPA ought to be involved. We built the first generation of renewables in New York State through the hydroelectric power plants that we built in New York State. We also built the first generation of transmission to connect those large-scale hydro renewable projects to the system. And so I believe this is nothing more than NYPA going back to its roots as a facilitator of the building of large-scale renewable, where that could be onshore or on land or offshore. So we need to explore a business plan on where do we fit in the REV context to be helpful in achieving the goal of 50% renewable by 2030. The next one is customer solutions. As Richard said, technology is improving, customer behaviors and preferences are changing. And to make the system more capital efficient, we need to help our customers install solar, our communities install solar. On the bottom picture there is battery storage. It's a Tesla battery system that helps grids or large facilities. On the top there is a microgrid and even electric vehicle infrastructure such as charging stations. NYPA will find a way, and our right role, our right spot and fit in this business and grow it as fast as we can. Right now, this is about $100–200 million business, energy efficiency and behind-the-meter businesses. I've challenged Jill Anderson and her team to grow this business as fast as possible, not only for the business part of it, but also its overlapping goal of advancing, reforming the energy vision. So this year, I will be spending a lot of time with our teams in figuring out how do we launch two businesses, large-scale renewable, and how do we interconnect those renewables to the grid. Could be large-scale wind, large-scale solar, large-scale batteries. How do we connect that to the grid? How do we build strategic transmission to bring that renewable to the load centers? That's one business. and the other business is to really supercharge our existing energy efficiency business, which is already 100, 200 million business, and maybe doubling that and getting more involved in customer-sided solar, customer-sided batteries, microgrids, and electric vehicle infrastructure. So that's the game plan for 2017. Thank you very much.
Well, why don't you just wait and we can have a bit of a conversation. Richard, appreciate the time and great presentation. Gil, the same. As I'm sitting here, it's educational, informational for me. As we focus on NYPA, it's easy to lose sight of or not fully appreciate how our relatively significant piece of the puzzle fits to the overall story. So I think it would be great. I don't know if Richard can share his presentation with us. I mean, to me, it's beneficial to have it. But two, I'd ask you to think about, even as you frame your regular presentations to us, that we start all the way at the top so that we're constantly reminded of what the overarching objectives are, and then how we fit in our initiatives, our strategic focus fits within it. I know you've developed that, but I think it would be beneficial to continuously reinforce and over-communicate with us on how it fits together so that we appropriately keep our eye on the bigger prize and ensure we're focused, raising, frankly, our line of sight around this table to ensure it's more strategically focused and less tactically, operationally driven. So to me, it's informational, but I think a nice opportunity to, less of a pivot, but just to lift us up and pull us up. But some of that takes some physical connectivity. We can maybe talk about, the form of that, but to ensure that we've got good alignment and that we all understand the necessary alignment and challenge ourselves to ensure we're optimally aligned with the bigger picture objectives. No implication we aren't, but just to ensure we stay focused.
And indeed, I know, we usually have towards this first quarter a refresh of planning under Richard with all the other agencies and authorities. And NYPA already, we have a schedule in February and March to refresh our strategic plan, and we will make sure and take that to heart
how we can knit all this together.
It's clear on what the bigger picture is and where do we fit nicely and with all the synergy. Yeah.
More than fit nicely, to me, I assume we're a leader in this.
Yes.
Really, as you said, that's how we position ourselves. So, I don't know, other thoughts, Tracy, Judge, Tony, Ann?
I had a couple of questions, so I'll since my voice is croaky, I'll go ahead and just put them both out there. One is around the offshore activity. I know that that's been a bit controversial in other locations, and so I'm just wondering if there's any perception that it could be controversial in New York State. The other would be around the workforce that's required for all of this change in the industry, and I know NYPA's invested in a workforce development center in Buffalo, and could you speak a little bit to how we're preparing incumbent workers for this transition and how we're looking at recruiting new workers and training them?
Yes, thank you, Trustee Kress. I'll take the first question, which is, are there going to be siting issues, for example, for offshore wind? Our sister authority, NYSERDA, is going to be conducting a master plan which will include a very extensive stakeholder management and stakeholder participation to make sure, for example, the people who fish in that area, and to make sure that before we go full steam ahead that we have addressed those issues. There will be issues that will come up from time to time. There will be communities that probably are not going to be as favorable having wind farms in their areas. But I know there was a study done by the New York ISO a few years ago that identified that we can actually build another, up to 10,000 megawatts of renewable energy, primarily wind, with very little need to upgrade large-scale transmission, for example. So that should minimize the environmental impact and the impact to the view shed. But, you know, the state is committed to being very thoughtful and to being very sensitive to siting issues. In terms of the workforce, this is going to require a different type of workforce. Just for example, at NYPA, since we're betting big on digital and making NYPA a digital utility, there will be a lot more requirements for employees with expertise in math and statistics and computers and graphics, technicians. I anticipate that will be the case. Christine Pizzo, our head of HR, is already working a plan towards that goal. In terms of renewable energy, how do you design, build solar panels and wind farms and the entire supply chain that's needed to support that? You know, that will be needed. Again, the state, through the New York State NYSERDA and NYPA, as well as Department of Labor and Empire State Development Authority, we're all working together to have a coherent plan and to make sure that those industries are built here. You know, the people who design and install renewable energy and maintain renewable energy assets are going to be located and based in New York, and those companies invest in New York. And Richard?
Could I just?
Yes.
People hear me? So if I could just add one thing about the most recent offshore wind project, because I think that it epitomizes change in culture and processes, which also has implications on workforce. So offshore wind off of Long Island has been around. You know, the idea of having a project there is not new. And so the project that LIPA entered into, the PPA that they entered into last week, is a project that has been under development for a while, but it's been too expensive.
And Richard, just for the trustee, I don't know whether you know, last week the Long Island Power Authority signed an agreement that will enable the construction of a 90-megawatt offshore wind on Long Island, the first in the nation.
It will be the largest offshore wind project in the nation. It's only 90 megawatts, but it's the beginning. So, it was expensive. So it's interesting to look at procurements. This is kind of a nerdy story, but this is a safe space, I think, here. Right? So LIPA had a procurement for renewable energy, and it has to be renewable energy that's deliverable to Long Island. So wind farms upstate don't count. So when they did an RFP for renewables on Long Island, the answer that came back was ground-mounted solar, because ground-mounted solar is cheaper than rooftop solar. So what that meant was cutting down trees on Long Island for solar, or putting solar on farmland on Long Island. So that wasn't a great outcome, right? So LIPA also had a procurement for the East End, South Fork on the East End, which is an area of grid constraint. And the results of that procurement were diesel generators. That wasn't a very good outcome either. So what we proposed was, how about a more open process for procurement and looking at both problems in an integrated way? And by doing that, offshore wind now became cost competitive because the power is going to be delivered to that grid-constrained area on the South Fork. So I talked before about this BQDM project in Brooklyn and Queens, where an open source process, rather than it being a substation, let the innovation of the market come back. And this is a very different approach for the utility industry, because the utility industry's approach in the past has been, we know the answer, we're going to procure that answer, as opposed to, I think what's happening in a lot of other companies now, a much more open source kind of process and engagement with innovators. That's the direction that the industry needs to move towards. NYPA can certainly be a leader here, but it is a really fundamentally different approach to processes that we need to undertake if we're going to build this new grid.
Other questions? All right, guys, well,
Thank you.
Yeah, well done. Appreciate it. Okay, Subhagya, you're up later with Jill, so I think we can hold your comments a little bit later. So, Joe, you're next in the queue. Ops, please.
Thank you, Chairman, trustees, Gil, and staff. I'll be brief. This is just going to be a quick summary of what we've done last year, going over the performance metrics and what you can expect to hear from us going forward this year. Recognizing your agenda has been very full, I want to be brief for you. So these are the performance metrics that reflect year-end now. We did talk last month that we were trending in this direction. Should be no surprises here. Transmission reliability really was affected by the Y49 line that we talked about several times. We did hit our generator market readiness target, and our environmental incidents, we're very proud of that record. A lot of that has to do with the R22 mitigation that we've done over the past year that we talked about over several years, getting rid of all the R22 that we have in our system. There's still a few little pockets here, especially the large plant out in Astoria, but generally speaking, we've gotten rid of a lot of that. And our DART rate, which is affected by just one more incident in December, which was a shoulder injury. Just for the benefit of the trustees, we're hearing in the line, the feedback from line staff that they really do appreciate that we elevate these issues to you and that you do react to this. So I just wanted to give you our appreciation from line staff that that when we elevate these things on the safety, they do appreciate that you contribute to that and your support. Key issues, really accomplishments, and a lot of things that Gil talked about I won't be redundant about, but we are ongoing with a lot of the things. Maybe utility operations have become boring in the conversation, and that's a good thing in operations, we always say. Quiet operations is good. But we do want you to know that a lot of the things that you have authorized us to do are in progress and continue to go, despite the fact that other things like canals and things have been the emphasis of these meetings. For example, we are now halfway through all the unit LEMs on the LPGP as of March this year. So half of the unit LEMs will be complete. And then that's just a picture of one of our large breakers, 765 kV breaker that we completed in one of our transmission LEMs. So those are obviously two enormous capital projects that you've been up to date on, and I know are in your board materials. But just so you know that they're in the background there, we're still achieving those goals and moving ahead on those targets. And last year was a great year for that, hitting those milestones. The things that you're going to hear from me, hopefully in the year to come, assuming everything goes well, is that you've heard a lot of the organizational changes we had around utility operations to make us more agile and dynamic around the things that Gil talked about, the fact that our workforce has to change and things like that. We are doing those things. We have accomplished a lot of them, and we're going to be taking the next steps into the organization, really to mitigate even some succession issues in QA, QC, reliability, compliance, and EH&S, employee health and safety. We have a number of people that maybe are potentially leaving the organization. We want to make sure that we keep that culture of high standards for ourselves in compliance and safety and environmental responsibility. And in regards to that, and emergency management especially, drills. Gil's been really on top of Subhagya and myself and Jen talking about emergency management, drills, and there's nothing more effective than really running through the paces on these things. And you just see a picture of what we did in an active shooter drill in Niagara, where we actually had, there's some video out there that we can share of the drill itself that was really impactful, and we learned a lot of things about that. We're going to do those drills across the region as well, all the regions as well. And then PV20 is just another project that we have that you'll be hearing about, because we hope to accomplish and energize that line, which is between Vermont and New York, sometime in the fall time frame. So there's just some targets and some nomenclature that you're going to hear going forward. And that's really all I have today, is just kind of like a brief overview of what you expect to hear in the coming year, and open to any questions that you have about utility operations.
In terms of the who and how you're going to accomplish what you just took us through, now that I'll say you're pretty well settled into your role, and maybe that's more of a question than a statement, do you feel as though transition's complete, the team's focused, everybody's aligned, and you're in a really good place, or is there more transition to go, or is that all in the rearview mirror and it's full steam ahead?
I'd say right at the nexus of that. I'd say what we have now is we've evolved the leadership team in utility operations across the broadest perspective, if you will. So the labor piece, technical services, technical compliance, environmental health and safety, those kinds of support services, the centralized support services and operations. The leadership team is in place. You recall we named Trish Lombardi, who's here today, Brad Van Auken, Paul Tartaglia in R&D. They all have their roles set. They are now taking, to your point, the next step and seeing what are the key elements that we have to move forward within their organizations. So that's kind of the thing that you're going to hear going forward. So I feel very comfortable where we are right now, and I think we're on the right track. There's still work to do, and I got a lot of cooperation from Christine Pizzo and the rest of the EMC on the things that we're trying to achieve.
And 30 days into canals to ensure that isn't disruptive or dilutive or even a distraction. Thoughts and opinions on the early returns there and your ability to assimilate, that into your organization?
Yeah, I think the current governance structure really gives us a good finger on the pulse of what's going on with canals right now. I don't believe there's any surprises that we have learned in the last 30 days. There are a lot of things that maybe from a scale standpoint we're trying to get a better grip of where the priorities might be. So we can understand the condition of some of the assets that are out there, but we're not fully, I don't think, aware until we get more involved with John and Brian, who are in Albany office today, on what the risks are to some of those things failing. So, and there's also a nexus between three key areas that we're looking at from in terms of the risk perspective, financially, but there's also the employee health and safety for the canals folks, then the public safety, and then there's this overriding civil works. There's a lot of things that an overriding civil works type project could resolve a lot of those issues, and that's kind of what we're trying to focus our energies on, is getting the broadest swath when we do these projects and prioritize them.
For the canals team, you've got that where you want it now, or is there still a little more work to
do? A little work to do there, some project planning work and things like that, some staffing that has to be done in that area. There are some consultants and other people we're looking to bring into the organization to help us with that. But we got the key components in place right now. Howard Goldball was a 15-year veteran of canals that came to the Power Authority a couple of years ago, is helping us lead that. We've had great collaboration with John Callahan and Brian Stratton and their staff as well, as identifying the key players and making sure that we brought them into the organization and we have the subject matter experts in place, and I think we got a good team to get started with.
One question that I had, looking at the big picture after the discussion or the presentation done by Richard and hearing Gil's view on his goal for 2017, a lot of this crosses in your world around generation and transmission, and how are you feeding into the discussion of moving us from an infrastructure that's focused a lot on the transmission into this new strategy that the authority is looking at? How does that feed into your world? How are you participating in the discussion, especially around digitization and how that will affect how you plan your workforce for the future?
Well, the real nexus is this integrated smart operating center. So that for us in utility operations. So in general, when we've been doing all the life extension modernizations and some of the other capital projects that we've done, we've been putting devices out in the fields. What we haven't had is this comprehensive view of drawing them all in and having a view that is not operation centric from a regional perspective. So what the integrated smart operating center is going to do is pull all that together. That is really within the utility operations group. So with the nexus in IT, so we are heavily involved. It's our staff that's manning it now, watching for these trends and reacting to them. And as Gil pointed out, there's some use cases that we've really, it's really only anecdotal right now, but based on the analytics that we have in place already, we're getting some gains on our small clean power plants. So we're right in the midst of it, and the core is, I think the nexus for all the digitization and the things that we're doing in utility operations is going to be in that ISOC.
Does that include the ability to manage or view parts or all of that other than the main center? I mean, with the digitation, I mean, you could have subparts of that could view the region or double regions or whatever.
Absolutely.
Is that all built in?
I mean, we have a lot of substations that are unmanned, so we probably will put cameras and, especially with energy security issues in those areas.
That's true of the canal as well.
Canals as well, absolutely.
Anything else for Joe? All right, great. Thanks very much,
Thank you.
Joe. Appreciate it. Jill, Commercial Office.
Good afternoon. So like Joe, I'm going to start out with a summary of 2016 and where we came at year end. Our overall revenue, both from contracts and out in the markets, was down 11% from budget, and that was tied primarily to the lower price of power that we saw in the wholesale market, which itself was down 22% versus what we expected at this time last year. That's primarily driven by what we were talking about all of last year, which is very low natural gas prices. And though I'm not showing January numbers because we haven't closed the month yet, month of January is continuing to see low prices, low natural gas prices. We're averaging in January $3 or $4, where this time normal years you'd be $7, $8, $9, $10. So we're seeing continuation of low commodity prices. On the positive side for us, that means that in our consumption of natural gas and our power plants down in the southeastern part of New York, we're buying fuel for much less than we had budgeted, so we did see an offset of spending $70 million less than we expected in fuel. And a broader part of this picture is talking about how we deal with hedging, and we've got later in the agenda today, Subhagi and I are going to get into that in detail. On the next component of the business development, Gil talked about this in detail on what we're looking at with large-scale renewables and transmission development. So I'll talk for a minute about economic development. You're going to hear later from Keith. We've got additional power allocations coming to you for your approval today. It's constant turnover, and constantly we're out there looking to make the most use of our low-cost power for the benefit of New York State. And so in the last slide, Gil also mentioned that he's put out a directive for us to significantly grow our customer side of the business. I think this fits in nicely with a lot of what you heard earlier from Richard Kaufman and the growth of distributed energy and services to the customer. So in 2016, we exceeded our total target. We were planning to do $141 million of investments with the customer. We delivered over 148, but you can see the growth here in these first three bullets. This year, we're looking to do 30% more than that with a $206 million target, and we're already now selling and pushing and closing on contracts for 2018 to see a further increase by another $70 million in 2018. Some examples of some of those big projects that help us deliver on those numbers. We're working with OGS, which is the Office of General Services in Albany. They have multiple locations where we're looking to do several very large projects, including combined heat and power and even a microgrid connection, as Richard Kaufman described. And then the one I have pictured here is a marquee project that our team is very excited to be working on with the MTA, and that's to completely relight 7 bridges that the MTA controls in New York City over the 5 boroughs. And you can see here an example or rendering of what that might be on the Verrazano Bridge, but these are all LEDs, color and controllable lighting to the scale that's never been done in a big urban environment like New York. So this is a huge project for us. It's a very tight timeline. It'll result in us helping to hit our targets for this year, and you're going to hear more about this project, I'm sure, as it moves forward.
If I could just add to that, so the 7, really 9 bridges, because the RFK Bridge have 3 spans, so 9 bridges in New York City, high-tech LED lighting, color controlled, centrally controlled and locally controlled. And so, for example, July 4th, with a press of a button, all of the bridges will be red, white, and blue. It will be, again, high-tech, energy-efficient LED lighting. We're really, really excited in this project.
And our contribution.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
no, you go ahead.
And this saves MTA money.
Well, if exactly, if they were to put a standard lighting rather than a high efficiency LED lighting, it would be much, much more expensive than what we're doing.
And our role is we're installing this. We're paid for the service to
Correct.
actually put up the lighting, right?
Yeah, we're the overall project manager. We're doing it from design all the way to construction. We'll, of course, have vendors who we work with who are actually doing the installation. It's not going to be Joe's team who does it, but it's overall a NYPA project from end to end.
And MTA will be paying us for this service.
Out of their savings.
No, I mean just out of the, it's a financial agreement. They will pay us over 15 years.
And then Gil highlighted the New York Energy Manager, which is continuing to grow, and we've got big plans for 2017. And K-Solar, to give you an example, we did finish the first K-Solar project in December. So I won't necessarily report on each of these initiatives every time, but just to give you a flavor of what some of the big projects and big activities are that we're doing on the customer side. Okay, and that's my summary.
And similar to my question to Joe, again, now that you've been in the role and as you look ahead, where are you with team and systems and infrastructure? Do you have it where you want it and need it to execute on all of these objectives? How much of a work in process is that? Where are you on that continuum?
Right now, I am in a very good place with my leadership team. We did some reorganization, which I talked about was part of my 100-day plan. Everyone is now in place. I just held an all-hands meeting with everyone in my organization from across the state last week, and we went over what all of our objectives are for 2017. We have the organization is in place. I don't need any further reorganization for now for us to accomplish our goals. So we're in a very good place. Very much in line with the vision that Gil put out in his presentation, we are in the middle of our own digitization. So we are upgrading the tools that we use for project management and scheduling and planning, for tracking our time and for improving our estimates. So we're in the middle of implementing those tools. We're also going to be, under Keith Hayes' leadership, embarking on a major reformation of how we handle our customers and digitizing that customer experience. And so as that gets developed, you'll hear more from us and from Keith about that.
Okay, so very execution focused.
We are execution focused,
Great.
yes.
Okay.
Great.
Other questions for Jill? Anyone? All right, super. Thanks, Jill. All right, Robert, next up, we had a little stronger finish than anticipated, so you have the pleasure of talking us through that.
Yeah, I think almost every meeting since I became CFO 2 years ago, I've had to say we're running under budget. So at least I have the opportunity to say things turned out better than we had thought. But let me get to that in a minute. First, just to review real quick, Gil mentioned our good news on the bond ratings. Both Moody's, S&P, and actually Fitch gave us a positive review just on our short-term debt. They'll be issuing a new rating on our longer-term debt when we do our bond issue sometime probably middle of this year. So the reason that's really good news is not only does it allow us to borrow at cheap rates, but it also gives us the maximum access to the capital markets so that we can fund our strategic plan, all the things that Gil mentioned that are going to be very capital intensive, whether it's transmission or the large-scale renewables that Gil talked about. Over the next 10 years are going to require a lot of funding. We'll be bringing some more details about that financial plan to you in coming meetings, but suffice to say that the ratings really are a sign that we've got the ability to fund that plan. Another good outcome that helps us fund that plan in 2017 and beyond is that we successfully concluded our transmission rate case. That basically puts a financial model in place that allows us to recover our costs on the investments that we're going to make in the transmission system, and the benefits to customers from those investments will exceed, of course, the cost of those investments. We mentioned at our last meeting our intent to do a bond issue. We still are monitoring market conditions. This is largely a refinancing, but also some new money financing. We expect to do that either later in the first quarter or in the second quarter of 2016. We'll obviously keep you abreast of the progress on that. Come back to that slide, but This basically shows where we are relative to our original budget from leading into the 2016 fiscal year. And you may recall that going into 2016, we budgeted on the assumption that the canal transfer was not going to happen. There was no legislation yet at that time. So our budget was to earn a positive $51 million. We made some more revenue than we expected at the time the budget was prepared from transmission. That includes a couple of different things there. One is some additional revenue from this rate case. And the other is that in this category is also some reduced lease payments for the HTP transmission line. That line has been out of service and is still out of service since around Thanksgiving. And the multiple outages that have occurred meant that we had some ability to offset our lease payments, resulting in some positive variance there to budget. We also underran our operating expenses for the year, so we had about a $47 million positive variance in the different operating expense categories. Canal Corporation, again, cost us $75 million of reimbursements that we were obligated to make to the New York State Thruway Authority since the legislation was passed in April and up to the point of the actual transfer in January. So that represents the reimbursements to Thruway for their operations of canal. We had the negative drop in energy prices during the year. That was a continuing story throughout the year, and we lost $55 million of margin versus budget due to that drop in energy prices. So we ended up the year with a $20 million net income. So just to put that number in some context, it's better than we thought it would be, and I'll go through the reasons, the variances as to how that occurred. But it is still significantly below what our target was, and is going through each year. We are trying to reach a net income target of about $80 million, and that's kind of the goal we've set ourselves for the next 4 years. Even though we had a budget of a little bit less than that going in, we try to get to about 80 million. Why that number? We try to have some cushion in our results so that we don't drop below zero if things like energy prices vary. And we also want to make sure that there's enough cushion in our debt service coverage ratios. Our debt service, our fixed charge coverage ratio for 2016 actually ended slightly below our target. So we have a 1.75 times coverage target in order to be in line with our AA rated peers. We ended the year at 1.68, slightly below our 1.75 target. So that results clearly, obviously it's better than zero, so that's a good thing, but it's not where we would have wanted it to be, largely due to some of these unanticipated events. The Canal Corporation transfer occurring, and we discussed this in past meetings, occurring after we had already made some payments to the state early in the year for state contributions. Let me go back. So just the reason for that difference in our $20 million positive result on the actual column there, at the bottom you can see our $20 million net income, where we had projected as of going into the December board meeting what our result would be was a negative $51 million. There are a variety of different line items on the right side there that cause that variance. The biggest is the transmission gross margin. The biggest component of that, again, is this HTP offset due to the fact that the line was out of service. And then various other categories. We had underruns in our operating expenses from our operations area, from our various support services during the year. As the year went on and we were dealing with some of these concerns about what our fiscal outcome was going to be at the end of the year, our staff did a great job of kind of reining in expenses. Where we had a little bit of a breakdown was, frankly, I think within the finance area, and this is something that's not acceptable to me as CFO. In communication of what the expenses were likely to be and making sure that those were tallied within our forecast. So I think, you know, the actions on the part of our staff were good and that they were tightening their belts. I think our 2017 plan is accurate and appropriate, and where people, you know, either delayed or had some insight into lower expenses potential for 2017, that is already reflected in our 2017 budget. To the extent that there was some disconnect, it was in that forecast that we brought to you in December that should have reflected some of that cost cutting and didn't. So we've got some work to do in the finance department to figure out how to improve that, the controls on that process to make sure that when we bring you a year-end projection, that it includes the actions of those, you know, and sometimes dozens or hundreds of people that are, you know, trying to manage the projects that need to get done between then and the year-end. Any questions on that before I move on?
We'll come back.
Okay.
Finish up.
Our economic value added metric, we ended up slightly above zero. That's a good thing. The economic value added, just to remind everybody, is an operating income metric. So this is really measuring, it does not include the effect of things that are below the operating income line. It's really a measure of how did we do in the profitability of our operating assets, not including things like you know, state contributions, and it also does not include canals. So from our core business, we earn slightly above zero. Zero is our target here, and what zero is telling us is that we earn back not just our operating expenses, but also our interest costs and a return on our invested capital. So that's it. So let me go back to this and see if there's any questions either on the variance or on the operating results for the year.
Maybe just make sure we've got it. Go back to your other slide, if you would, Bob. So the HDP impact, make sure we understand that in terms of transmission margin.
Right.
So when you put your forecast together, that line was or wasn't up or down, and this is the quote-unquote benefit of not having that line in service for a month or more. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, that outage turned out to be more serious than we expected based on what had happened in the past on that line and our own experience with our underwater transmission line. We expected that it would come back in service. We made a conservative assumption about that. It didn't happen. So about $15 million of that $22 million difference is due to the HDP line being out of service. It is still out as we speak.
So we're accruing a benefit from having a line out of service.
That's right.
But that being out of service doesn't compromise our ability to provide power to customers, et cetera, right?
That's correct.
That's correct.
All right.
So, another question, yeah. So as you look at this, obviously no one will complain ending the year with more money than you expected. It's generally, I'd like for my checkbook to end up that way. I haven't managed to figure out how to do it, but it also means that, you know, as you're, you know, we've been talking about digitization and how our internal infrastructure is helping us capture data more appropriately so that we can proper set goals for our workforce. How is your system working where you can get the kind of input where people were saying they've given a forecast or a projection of what they expected their cost to be. Somehow that wasn't working into the system, so you ended up with more cost savings than people had accounted for, though I assume they told you they were expecting that because the direction had gone out, this is what we want to do. You know, what's happening with the system to make sure that you properly are capturing what the different business lines are doing so that you can feed into these, you know, whether it's operations or corporate support and R&D.
Right. Well, we've gotten through what I would maybe characterize as the diagnosis stage. So we know why it happened. We know what happened. I don't want to jump to how we're going to fix it yet. I think that we ought to take a little bit of time to figure that out. But generally what has to happen is, we need both better communications across the authority with our financial team, which is not the staff's fault. That's that's our fault. But also making sure that even within finance that we do a better job of having a system in place, as you're saying, to reflect that in our projection for the year end. We may need some better software to do that as well. And I'll come back to you at the March meeting with more of a plan for how we intend to control that better for next year's budget. Around the middle of the year, we're going to put together the budget for 2018. We've got to make sure that this doesn't happen again, and that when I bring you a forecast for 2017, that it reflects the most up-to-date results that we have based on all of the knowledge about how spending is likely to play out across the authority.
Yeah, because part of why that's important is we want to appropriately deploy what we have, and so there are decisions being made about priorities in our strategy based on what we think we'll have to be able to have access to. So
absolutely, and that's why I say it's not acceptable to me. I mean, obviously, it's great that it was a positive variance rather than negative variance, but first of all, large variances are just not good in either direction because we need to plan. We need to communicate what our financial status is so that we can take appropriate action on either side, and so that we definitely need to tighten that up. There's no question about it.
And make sure I understand, Bob, why you're so confident in the budget and the plan for 17, given that the baseline for 16 that you utilized in developing that plan was a miss to the tune of $70 million.
Well, yeah. So a couple of things, a couple of answers there. One is, first of all, just to keep this in context, we spend about $2 billion a year on the operations of the authority. A good chunk of that is things like fuel costs, but we're talking about a much larger base than we're debating here, and this is a not insignificant number. So I don't want to minimize that, but as a percentage of the $2 billion that we spend, it's 2.5%. The 2017 budget was prepared by all of our staff, rolling up all of their plans with the knowledge that of what they were likely to spend in 2016 and what may get delayed into 2017. So they prepared that budget with that knowledge. What happened was not that the budget was prepared in any way incorrectly. It's just that the year-end forecast did not incorporate some of that most up-to-date information. So we feel very confident that 2017 plan is accurate, and not that there aren't things that could change throughout the year, but it is incorporating all of our best available information as of today.
All right. Well, you said earlier that you feel as though you and your team have diagnosed the problem. Now you need to determine the cure and the fix.
That's right.
Is it fair to say we're back together in March? You'll be able to come back to us with your plan for the fix,
yes,
or the beginnings of the implementation to ensure we have a fix?
That's correct.
So, because as you've said, and I appreciate, we need to be better.
Mm-hmm.
I accept the broader parameter, but you and your team, I'm sure, pride yourself on being better than that. Good news is it finished where it did. So, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Keith, some additional power allocations. Reservation power.
And Western New York hydropower.
Correct.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, trustees, executive staff, and everyone in attendance today. This next item requests the trustees to approve a 400 kilowatt allocation of preservation power to Potsdam Specialty Paper, located in Potsdam, St. Lawrence County. Potsdam Specialty Paper, Inc. is planning to expand its operations by building a new production line, creating at least 22 new high-paying jobs, and investing a minimum of $2 million in the facility. The North Country Economic Development Agencies and Empire State Development have also expressed support for this allocation, and I want to point out that this allocation is consistent and directly attributable to our St. Lawrence County Economic Development Plan that we recently deployed. The trustees are also being asked to authorize a public hearing on the proposed contract for Potsdam Specialty Papers, Inc. This item is submitted for your approval. I'd be happy to take any questions.
What do we mean by high-paying jobs? Generally, what's the range?
So the average salary and benefits for these employees is set at about $60,000 annually. And I'm sure the judge could attest to that's probably double the median salary in this part of the state.
Any other questions? Good, then have a motion to approve the recommendation.
I would move that.
Second.
All right, moved and second. Any other questions? Otherwise, all in favor, aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Next. Mayor Brothers.
Mayor Brothers. This item requests the trustees to approve a 200 kilowatt allocation of replacement power to Mayor Brothers Apple Products, Inc., which is planning an expansion at its facility in the town of Somerset, located in Niagara County. The allocation would support the creation of 19 new jobs and an investment of $3.2 million to construct a 40,000 square foot addition and add a new hot bottling line at that facility. The item also requests the trustees to authorize a public hearing on the proposed contract for Mayor Brothers. The Mayor Brothers facility in Somerset is a current Recharge New York customer and is in compliance with its existing allocations, contractual commitments. I would point out also that Mayor Brothers established its business in 1852, long-standing business in the community. This item is submitted for your approval. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Question, is Somerset the location of a plant that's on the chopping block? Or?
Not that I'm aware of. That might be West Seneca.
Chopping block for what?
I thought it was
like a coal plant.
Coal
Yeah.
plant closing?
Oh.
No, that's a different
There's
location.
a plant out there. It's not one of the two that Gil referred to.
Okay.
Unrelated to Mayor Brothers.
Right.
Got it, okay. All right, any other questions? Happy to entertain a motion. I have a motion. Second. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Otherwise, all in favor, aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Keith. Let's, why don't we jump to canals and Kim and Justin, and then we can come back and have Finance Committee report out and tie all of that together. So, Kim, we're 3 days into our new reality with our canal friends and brethren and partners. Again, kudos on a great job leading us through a wonderfully successful integration conversion. So well done to you and your team.
Thank you, Chairman, trustees, members of the public. I want to first profoundly thank the team that worked with both the NYPA, the canals, and the Thruway to really accomplish, which is an impressive, seamless transition of a 450-person organization, 300 plus or 500 plus miles long, assets, robust in nature, and it was seamless. And we're now on to the next day and doing the good work. But just a quick recap of what was accomplished to get to day one operations. Everybody got moved. They all got stood up where they needed to be. Equipment got deployed. Training is being rolled out. Payroll went live with no glitches for 450 people. Transition services agreement were finalized. We're getting some selective services from the Thruway. And we had communication plans out not only just to the employees, but to our external stakeholders as well, that things have transitioned and they're going well. As the chairman indicated, it's now day 2, and what else are we doing and what are we looking at over the next 100 days? Within that time period, we have a couple of things. First, with respect to the transfer, we set up a governance structure, a canal management committee at the top that's really going to interact with NYPA executives and Director Stratton to work on the transition and the transformation of the Canal Corporation, as well as the high-level day-to-day operational decisions. Second, we have a day 2 operating model. As many of you know, there are a couple things that went on to get us to day 1. First and foremost, there were some temporary solutions that were enacted on the IT level to get us across that finish line. And second, we have these transition services agreement with a Thruway, providing some selective services to NYPA in the HR and some other functions. So our plan now is to take a look at what's our day two operating model, and that is really what is the steady state ongoing operations model we want to put in place. That's going to include reviewing some of the temporary solutions, especially on IT, and seeing, is there a different solution, a more permanent solution, or maybe the temporary solutions actually work fine and we're going to stick with them. So our goal is to have a convergence of looking at what's our operating model going forward and how are we exiting out of temporary solutions as well as the temporary services or the transition services agreements. So we want to exit those temporary and the TSAs, and what's our steady state going forward, and we're working on that, and we're developing a detailed 100-day plan in that regard. The second is the secure, stabilize, and the transformation. We had some hypercare, some additional assets we brought in to get us over that day one headline, so we're now pulling back from that hypercare situation. Now we're working with, and with your approval today of the budget, specifically on the secure and stabilize programs, especially in vegetation management, embankment inspection, culvert inspection, and we have a robust plan. Now we're starting to roll those inspection programs out, which are new, and we're going to learn from that and continue to adjust and evolve in those programs. Additionally, we're looking for operational improvement and efficiencies. I think Joe Kessler will agree with me. It's an engineer's dream in one respect because there's a lot of operational improvements we can bring to the canal. There is a way to do things a little bit more efficiently, and because of the synergies that does exist between a NYPA water-based asset management team and a canal corporation, we're going to identify them and implement them. And to do that, we got to bring along the key stakeholders, both our internal folks, lock operators, section supervisors, division heads, as well as the external groups of those individuals who are really focused on the canal as a heritage asset for New York. Lastly, we have an ongoing open contract discussion with the labor unions at the Canal Corporation, both PEF and CSCA, and we're going to be working to finalize and close out those contract discussions over the course of the next couple of months. Lastly, with respect to managing the people, I think one of the biggest day two activities we also have is really doing the change management culture, and that is bringing the Canal Corporation workforce into looking at things the way we look at them at NYPA and trying to teach them best practices and procedures. But it's not doing that in isolation. It's looking at what the men and women of the Canal Corporation have been doing for the last 20 years, building in their experience and their expertise, and seeing how we can merge those to get to best practices and roll them out into the field. We still need to do some job recruiting. We talked about this before of how many people did we need, and especially operations, to get to day one. I can report we're at day one and beyond, and we're functioning fine, but we know that there are some resource needs that we need to bring in. We're temporarily filling them with contractors, but we are continuing to look for those permanent FTEs that we think we need in-house, both at HQ and out in the field. And lastly, this is a big year for the canals. It's the 200th anniversary of the canal in New York State. It's a big deal to hit a bicentennial. NYPA is 85 years old, but the canal's 200. And so we want to look to celebrate the bicentennial, as well as being the host of the World's Canals Conference in Syracuse in the fall. People are going to come from all over the world. And so really that bottom line, the special events, it's really about how do we use that platform to drive the transformation of the canals and the public, what's the new face we want to put on canals? And this is a great venue to show that new face and really drive the transformation in a way that improves efficiencies in operations, drives the recreational nature of the asset, which is going to increase tourism and have an additional effect of driving economic development, especially in the canal communities. So we have an ambitious agenda now. The work is not done. We just changed hats, and we have a great team in place to really, I think, hit the ground running and come back hopefully in a couple months with some good news.
In terms of great team, at this point, organizational roles, responsibilities, there's good clarity, good understanding, who's on first, second, and third, how they roll up, report up, good dialogue and discussion on all of that?
Absolutely. We have the organizational chart as well as the Canal Management Committee, and everybody knows who they're reporting to, and we have a good, clear path of information flow. That's the biggest thing. We want to make sure that Canal Corporation line individuals from the director to the executive deputy and the head of administrative services have a clear path of reporting up into NYPA and getting clarification and guidance, as well as engineering is reporting right up from Canals into Joe Kessler as the COO of NYPA. So the right streams of reporting are there, and that should drive our success.
And when we're back together as a board in March, middle of March, the latter part of March, I'll make sure I read this right, we should be flying on our own. I mean, your TSAs, your short-term transition agreements will be behind us. Am I looking at that correctly?
So what this says is that we're going to agree with Thruway as to the plan for execution of exit. Some of them are going to have it, but we're going to finalize that date to get out. Some of them we're going to be out of. There's some that, I'll give you one example, construction management. Those are long-term projects, so those are not they're in existence, and it's going to take us a little while longer to ramp out of those. But we are driving towards an exit strategy with Thruway, and we are doing everything we can to accelerate that because we think being masters of our own destiny is really how we're going to achieve the efficiencies.
Right. And so when would you ultimately expect that milestone, the ultimate milestone to fly on our own to come?
So total no TSA is probably within the year, so by year's end. It depends, though, on some of the construction management projects. If they have slippage in construction schedules, it could take us a little bit longer to get out of it.
But it's March that you'll lay out for us what.
Yes. Yeah, our plan is to have a list of we have 41 TSAs. I'm looking, where's Javier, who is our master of negotiating? 41 TSAs. We're out of 7 already, John Canale. So we're looking for ways out every day that we proceed.
Okay.
Well, kudos all around to your team for
no question.
getting us over the finish line.
Yeah, to you and everyone here, Brian, John, your guys as well, your troops, kudos, one and all. I think, round of applause there for a great job. Now the real work, begins. So yeah, keep pushing. So well done, Kim. Thank you very much. Justin, in connection with canals, we had a little bit of reorg earlier. No, go right ahead. That we need to formally affirm here in this forum, from charters to bylaws, the roles, responsibilities, and all the rest. They give us a quick little drive-by so we can formalize that. We did the same thing out of finance, so we can button up budgets, and then we're officially off and running. So
very good.
Guide us through that if you would.
Will do. So this morning, the Canal Corp board formed its 3 standing committees, and their charters were adopted. And now the final piece in establishing the governance framework for the Canal Corp is the establishment of the corporation's bylaws. So in order to facilitate the Canal Corp's operations as a subsidiary of the Power Authority, but at the same time maintaining its distinct legal entity, it's necessary to create and adopt these governance documents. And to effectuate this, you have before you a new set of Canal Corp bylaws. These bylaws track in all material respects the Power Authority bylaws, and this was done in order to increase efficiency and coherence in board and committee governance procedures. And it's worth noting that the Thruway Authority adopted the same approach when it took the Canal Corp under its fold in 1992. So some quick highlights. Board members are the same as the legislature directed us, that board members of the Canal Corp will be the board members of the Power Authority. The board should meet at least quarterly, and the majority of the board members constitutes a quorum, similar to the Power Authority structure. The officers of the Canal Corp are the same as NYPA's officers and have similar powers and duties as set forth in the bylaws. And we formed earlier today the 3 standing committees of the Canal Corp, similar to the Power Authority: audit, governance, and finance. And the committee members will be the same for the Canal Corp as they are for the Power Authority. The board has to review and adopt an annual budget, a strategic plan, a capital plan, and an expenditure plan. And finally, the board has the power to amend, alter, or repeal these bylaws at any meeting in the future. So this item is submitted for your approval.
So we've got parent, subsidiary, the subs, bylaws, charters, structure, governance, oversight mirrors the parents.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And we put all of that in place earlier this morning with the canals organization meeting, so all we need to formally do here is approve bylaws.
Yes.
All right, so could I have a motion to do that, please?
So moved.
So moved.
Second?
Have a second. Unless there's any further discussion, all in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Bylaws in place.
Thank you.
Super. And also this morning in Finance Committee, we refreshed our discussion from December and formally are bringing forward recommendations relative to both the canals budget and NYPA's budget to incorporate canals. Tracy,
Couldn't
please.
say that better. That's it.
Okay.
So, yeah, we voted and recommended to the full board the adoption of the 2017 amended authority budget as well as the Canal Corporation budget. So,
And we need a motion to approve both at this level, right? So that's a motion to approve both the canals budget and the amended NYPA budget to incorporate the canals budget.
correct.
Whether we can do that in one or two motions, Karen, you'll clean that up.
Yes.
Judge, can you second Tracy's motion?
I so second it.
Thank you very much. Assuming Ann's nodding, so unless we have any other further discussion, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? Motion carried. So we have everything now in order. We've got our mirror organization. We're structured. We've got budgets approved. We've got team in place. We're exiting TSAs. Canals is off and running. So again, good work, one and all.
Flowing.
All right, the water's running. All right, that leaves our last agenda item. We've talked in the past. Jill referenced it earlier. Bob talks about it all the time in terms of the financial impacts of energy pricing and managing the market risk associated with that. Jill and Subhagya, you're going to, I think, tag team a bit of a presentation to talk to us about how we're doing our best to minimize the risk or optimize outcomes under challenging and volatile market circumstances.
That's right. So I'm going to start out and talk a little bit about what the merchant portfolio is and what some of our challenges are, and Subhagya is going to go into how we are managing that going forward under a more comprehensive risk approach. So NYPA's portfolio in our wholesale power generation, we sell over 70% of it in long-term contracts. These are bilateral agreements between us and economic development customers like the ones that you just approved from Keith earlier today, or to our large customer base down the southeastern New York governmental customers. We also have statutes that have us sell power out of our hydro assets to neighboring states. So the majority of the power that we sell, we have a pretty certain revenue stream associated with that. And so we know the price. We have a lot of long-term visibility into that, and that makes up about 70%. 30% of the remaining, we call that merchant. And so that just means that it's not under any kind of long-term contract. And instead, we're settling that transaction in the wholesale energy market that's operated by the New York ISO. There's multiple products that we sell. We sell the energy, we sell the capacity, and we also do some hedging, both physical and financial hedging, in order to try to get more certainty around what the revenue is going to be associated with that merchant portfolio. But when you hear from me at each of these trustee meetings about where we are with the market, where we are versus budget, it's usually, if it's off, either high or low, it's because of that 30%. It's not because of the top 70%. So what we're going to focus on for this presentation is how are we managing that 30%, because it has significant impacts to NYPA. You can see it here. This is the total revenue associated with those two pieces. The dark blue is what we have under long-term contract. The light blue is what's out there in merchant. But the red box is showing you where that merchant could be. The revenue in 2017, you'll see that the red box goes above. And as it gets out further, the red box gets bigger and bigger because we haven't put any hedges in place, and also the further out you are, the less certainty there is about what the market is going to look like. Now, an important illustration on this slide is the line that's going across all of those bars. That's what our actual operating expenses are. And so you can see that if we just brought in money from the contracted sales, we wouldn't have sufficient income to cover our operating expenses. So the merchant portfolio is a critical part of NYPA's financial picture, and that's why it's so important that we put more certainty around the revenue associated with that portfolio. So in 17, we've already put hedges in place that guarantee that the minimum we're going to get from the merchant portfolio is sufficient to cover our operating expenses. And as you can see, as we get further out, we need to start layering in more hedges in order to provide that certainty for years forward. And the reason why there's hedges are so important is because we're operating in a very volatile environment. Zone A is the western New York part of New York State, where we're selling the majority of our hydro from Niagara. And you can see the price just over the last 8 years has gone up and down quite dramatically. And you can see the sort of consistent since 2014 downward trend that we've been seeing, and you've been hearing me report on that. A lot of that is driven by a consistent associated downward trend of natural gas prices, because even though we're generating hydro, the market itself, the price in that market is being set by a natural gas power plant. Now, on the other side, the other piece of the big risk for our merchant portfolio is the volume of merchant energy that we produce. Now, if you're just talking about gas plants, you don't have that risk because you know exactly how many megawatt hours you're going to generate. It's however much gas you're going to burn. But we're operating run-of-river hydro plants where it's really more long-term weather patterns that are determining how much water is going to be available to us. So we do a lot of forecasting. There's a lot of science behind this, but there's also a lot of art in guessing and figuring out how much hydro is going to be available. So we're, and you've heard Bob talk about this, we're actually upward trend right now, a little higher than long-term average of hydro, but that can vary within a year even, and we're constantly updating those forecasts. And so what we're trying to accomplish, I look at a one-year snapshot, this is 2017, and so if we look at the far left, just from that 30% that's merchant, going into 2017, depending on all those variables, I had a low expectation of $230 million in revenue and a high side expectation of $400 million. So it's a huge, huge spread that we're trying to deal with. But by putting hedges in place, essentially pre-selling, you could look at it, some of our energy at a set price with a counterparty, with a bank, with another customer who needs energy in their portfolio, we're able to shrink that band into something that we determine is more reasonable. The more you shrink it, the more of the upside you're giving up. So we're not necessarily trying to get us all the way down to one certain number. You could do that, but it's going to be lower and lower, right? So what we've done is traded for bringing that 230 up to 315. We traded going from 404 to 388. And this is going to be different in every year in every marketplace. You know, we might not always be able to go up towards that upper half. Sometimes you go straight into the middle as you're squeezing those two ends. But that's effectively what we're trying to accomplish by putting hedging in place on our merchant portfolio. And I'm going to turn it over to Subhagya to continue on how we are actually implementing the hedges.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, trustees, Gil, and senior management of NYPA and staff. So Gil very eloquently explained the need for hedging. So what we're doing now, we're moving away from a spot year hedging to a multi-year hedging. Why we're doing that? We're doing that because we will have a greater range of options to manage our budget. So as you can see, the idea is to as we get closer to the prompt year, we're going to have hedging target at 100%, and then as we move out to the outer year, to the fourth year, we will have smaller percentage of hedges already put in place. So this is somewhat akin to a dollar cost averaging kind of a approach, where it's going to be programmatic, so that we are having a 4-year look ahead, but we are also not locking ourselves completely, so that if there's an opportunity, because we consider ourselves to be good stewards of the state's assets, we want to make sure that any opportunity that we see in the market, we at least we capitalize on that opportunity, and we give us enough room to play in this market while conserving the integrity of the program as well as making sure the budget targets are met appropriately. Any questions on this?
Why don't you run through and then we'll come back, all right?
Sure, no problems.
We'll talk to you and Joe.
Yep. So what we're doing, as you saw, we are actually moving out of the target of net income hedging to a gross margin hedging, because gross margin, we think, is more controllable by the commercial management, commercial operations team. Because there are a lot of things that appear below gross margin that the team doesn't have any control over. So we're going to set, there are 3 stages of this framework, risk management framework. We're going to set performance targets, we're going to set the risk limits, then we're going to analyze and execute the portfolio on a continuous basis. So coming back to performance targets, this is going to be a cross-functional approach. So we're going to have operations, we're going to have risk management, we're going to have commercial operations, and we're going to have finance coming together to set the gross margin target based on where we see the forward price curve, where we see the volume projection. We're going to have that constant discussion and come up with a gross margin target. And then commercial operations is going to focus on their part of the gross margin target, which is going to come from the merchant portfolio. And the accountability to manage to that target is going to be put on them. At the same time, we'll also, once the gross margin target is fixed, we're also going to set the gross margin at risk limits, meaning how low can we go. Bob talked about our fixed charge coverage ratio being a very important metric for our credit rating agencies. So right now, our goal is to have not go below 1.75 times the fixed charge coverage ratio as far as the gross margin is concerned. So, so we're going to set that, and those limits are going to be, year over year, depending on the company's priorities. We're going to set those gross margin at risk limits, and then we're going to have a constant monitoring of those gross margin at risk limits on a daily basis, so that we get any early warning indicators. So we're going to, reposition our targets, hedge targets appropriately. So that's the last graphic. So we're going to determine the positions every day. We're going to measure performance against our target. We're going to hopefully expand our toolkit in terms of not just looking at forward and swaps as hedging tools, but also, expanding it to other kind of structured products, so that we can appropriately manage our risk by going in and out depending on the circumstances. So that's really the framework that we're going to talk about, we're going to implement right now. So obviously this is going to take, it's going to need investment in people, process, and technology like anything else. So what we did, we started this project last year, April, and we did a risk appetite workshop in July. Since then, we have released an RFP, and we've been in the process of hiring people, and we hope that by end of 2017, we will have 2 software technology tools. One is the energy commodity risk management tool. The other one is the portfolio analytics tool. We're going to have these 2 tools in place. We're going to hire a system integrator to help us implement those tools. We're already developing process changes that we need to implement these tools appropriately. And we're also hiring people. We've hired few, and Jill's going to probably also rearrange and hire people depending on her needs. So that's really what I had to say, and then, that's it.
help me understand. What you're hedging is the energy, that 30%, not the capacity. You're hedging the 30%.
We hedge both the energy, so the volume of energy that we're producing, and then also we can hedge the capacity itself, because consumers have an appetite for both. So you have to, someone like us, a utility, has to buy the energy that's needed to keep the lights on, and we also have an obligation to go into the market and buy capacity so that those plants are available, that the energy will be generated. And so we hedge both products.
So I just want to add that, so hedging is the capacity market, we experience that as we go further out into the future, the capacity market is not very liquid. So it's going to be difficult to hedge through normal financial tools. So that's why we're looking at expanding our toolkit to put more structured products going forward, which we will have the ability to measure the risk exposure to that through our new tools that we're going to put in place.
Do you hold out some portion of what you're hedging for in case circumstances change?
Absolutely.
Yes.
So when Subhagya's graph showed here that we're going to 100%, that's 100% of the volume that our internal Energy Risk Management Committee has approved and determined that we should go out and hedge. That's not 100% of everything that might be available on the table. And that way, we don't want to be in a position where we've hedged more than actually shows up. So we might generate less energy because of the hydro volume risk, and then I'm out there in positions that I have to make good on. So we come in a little lower than what the total might be that we have on the table.
A question I had, so what's been our hedging strategy to date? Have we done 1 year hedging strategies?
1 year.
And so the plan now is to move to this multi-year as
Correct.
opposed to 1 year, which, to your point, is more difficult. There are fewer tools out there to do that because it's harder to do, or to figure out whether or not it will benefit you to do that.
But there's also more opportunity because as long as Subhagya said, we're constantly monitoring. I could put hedges in place for 2019, but I'm going to watch those. I could unwind them. Like if the market starts to go.
Because the time, if you're locked in for a year, but you're going to have the ability to actually get out.
Active.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So we set parameters for the traders, and the traders know what their limits are, but they don't have to come ask for permission to come in and out of positions. They should be actively managing their portfolio.
Also, just to clarify the answer to your question about what have we done previously, for the last couple of years, we have been hedging 1 year out, and a fairly significant percentage of the amount that, as Jill says, we believe is going to be available for hedging. But prior to that, we hedged actually very little, even 1 year. And that was because we had net income levels that were $200-300 million, and we just said, we don't want to give up some of the upside in order to hedge the downside when we're not that sensitive within that $200 million band. So now that we're operating at a little tighter margins, the hedging is becoming more and more important. And, the rating agencies take comfort in this program and knowing that we're managing it very professionally and that our variability within that band is much narrower.
And people pay money for this stuff.
Yes.
Well, in fact, yeah, you can.
Yes. Yep.
Yep.
In fact, one of,
Like you can bet on the outcome of the Super Bowl, you can bet on, as long as there's a counterparty willing to take the other side.
There always is. Hoping
Well,
they win.
And on that, so if I go back to your last implementation timeline, clarify, people process technology, you're stepping into a program while you're building it. Where are we with people process and technology? How much of that do we have in place given the program that's already being executed, and traders and counterparty risk and all the rest of that? I only know enough to be semi-dangerous here, and this always raises concerns we're going to get upside down or whatever. We're putting the organization in harm's way at a time when we're otherwise trying to mitigate that. So where are we with people process and technology versus the program? We don't have the cart ahead of the horse. Talk to us there.
So our major gap is really in the technology side. I think we believe we have already done a gap analysis on the people and process. We're working towards meeting those gaps. The technology is really the big gap, which is what we have the RFP out, and we've started receiving responses from the prospective vendors already. So we should be, John, you have any view as to when we should be able to?
Hopefully we'll bring the award in March.
So
when would it be in place? I mean, sometime in the second, third quarter?
Yeah, so our goal is to complete implementation by the end of 2017. This contract is for not only the tools, but also for the system integrator.
And we have a system in place that we've been using, and it's adequate for the strategy that we've had in the past. It's just as we're using some of these new methods that Subhagya and Jill are talking about, we need a more sophisticated tool. So we'll have that in place this year.
Yeah, and here's one. Sorry, were you going to say something, John?
Well, I was just going to say, so, I mean, in terms of where we are and how much you want to give us an hour, and just share with us, but what is in place now? Who's doing the trading now? How are we evaluating the other counterparties? What's the credit worthiness of the counterparties? Who are we doing business with? Who are our counterparties? What is the risk? They'll fail to perform, et cetera. I mean, we're just looking for a little more transparency with some regular reporting, to us, so that it comes up the ladder here. That there's just that transparency and awareness, education, information flow, so that we don't get bitten in the backside and are blindsided by that. So, yeah, I get it. There's no pushback in that. I just want to ensure that governance and oversight's appropriate as you further step your way into this.
So my team's doing it now. So we have traders in place. It's managed under Jenny Liu, who you guys saw.
Employed by NYPA. So
Correct.
These are NYPA employees.
We do it in-house. Yes. And then our counterparties are anything from large banks to independent power producers. We have a close process that is with finance and with risk, where if I've got a new counterparty, we have a standard contract that gets put in place. There's collateral that gets posted. There's certain limits, depending on the person's grade in the organization, that they're allowed to execute before they require approval from a higher authority. So that's been in place.
Our counterparties are all highly rated, bond-rated entities.
That's the kind of stuff I'm looking for.
So they're like, A plus or better entities, and we, based on what their rating is, we might vary the credit that we extend to them, the collateral requirements. So we've got a schedule that's continually reviewed. As Jill said, new applicants, we continue to run through that same system, and our treasurer and his staff is responsible really for the setting of those limits based on the credit review that's done.
So there's got to be regular reporting that you can share with us in terms of the face value of the contracts and all the rest of that, so we would have a better handle.
We already report that to our executive risk management committee. We're happy to bubble that up to you.
Why don't we just bubble that up one level
so we know how far we're stepping in, we have a better handle on that.
Right, because we've obviously been doing this, right? And so how successful have we been? Like, what would be the impact if we hadn't hedged what we've done? Because we're now about to invest in new technology and new people, so the assumption is that this will improve what we already have.
Right.
And so just an indication of how good our strategy has been in the past, and so therefore justifies why we want to make these kind of investment going forward to improve that.
When you're in a downward trending market like we've been, our hedges have been positive. And so we certainly can include that in the report. We monitor that with our Energy Risk Management Committee in 2016. Say it was on the order of $50 million positive. But one thing that's important about our strategy for hedging is not that we're looking for it to make money. We're looking for it for revenue certainty. And so as long as at the time that we put the hedge in place, up until when, we realize that transaction, it's based on market forecasts and based on what we value our product to be. And so it might be that the market moves against you, but we've still achieved our objective of a certain revenue projections. So we're very careful to not enter into speculative hedging. We're only hedging with volume that we have as certain in our portfolio, and only for the purposes of revenue certainty, not in order to boost earnings.
With a target in mind, you're hedging with a target in mind.
Correct.
So back to, the slide you reported on earlier, so plan of 2.7 million, actual of 2.4 million, $300 million miss, 11%. You're saying that would have been 350,
would have been worse.
350
without the
benefit of the hedging program. So part of the debate, to me, around this table needs to be what can we do to further close the gap? I mean, a $300 million miss relative to that, how can we further optimize that and all the rest? So to me, beyond just the execution, it's just what is the strategic play that we can do to further optimize results and outcomes.
Yes.
As that we're not trying to win, we're just trying to ensure we don't lose.
The number we had projected.
Yeah,
yes.
correct. And we need certainty. We want to take that volatility and all the rest of it. So to me, this is just dialogue. I'll defer to the three of you, the two of you, Bob, on how you build that into our ongoing reporting and dialogue. We can pick it up in the Finance Committee. We can carry it forward to full board, but I think it would be an important regular component of, again, board level, not trying to get into the weeds, not trying to overmanage the business, just trying to ensure there's appropriate awareness.
Significant exposure.
Yeah, and that you're able to bring to us, okay, this is where we are, and make sure that we're collectively comfortable or have the opportunity to challenge the thinking a little bit. Yep. Is that fair?
Yeah, it makes sense. We're doing it with Energy Risk Management Committee. I think it's a great way to come up from there.
We talked a lot about the hydro volume risk too, and that's obviously much more resistant to hedging, but we can make this maybe part of Subhagi's risk report.
Or between risk and finance and all the rest of it just needs to, come up as part of regular reporting, and then we can, dialogue on it as you see opportunities to move strategically.
And if I could add, I think at least one time, maybe in March, we can show you and reassure you the controls that we have in place, part of our risk management policy. I mean, I think just to make sure.
Have we recruited these traders, these young whippersnappers?
There's no what's that whale in
right, exactly.
London whale. No. So it's that's one thing that I'd like to bring back.
He's on board. We brought him over.
I want
Jamie cut him loose, so we picked him up.
So I want to reassure you about the controls we have in place. That's number one in March, and then second, Jill mentioned we're not directionally guessing prices here, but also a dashboard maybe that from the Risk Management Committee, something about the value at risk.
We have that dashboard, so
we
can share that.
That kind of stuff.
Sure
so mark to market of the portfolio, the value at risk, etc.
Okay. That's all I'm saying. So that make that part of
that's
your
no problem.
regular presentation. It can be a one-page slide, two-page slide, and all the rest of that.
Internal audits involved.
You can.
Yeah, that's going to be absolutely.
She's on. All right, thanks very much, you guys. Well done. Very helpful, and I think again the kind of topic that. Better transparency and better engagement around this table will be helpful. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. Good work. All right, with that, unless there's any other matters to come before the board, our next meeting is, as we've already referenced, middle of March, I think March 21st. Is that right, Karen? Mm-hmm. Again, a big day for all of us here at the Power Authority. And now Canals, again, kudos to Gil, Kim, Brian, the entire organization for making that transition. Very, very well done. We're happy and excited to have you officially part of our family. Know that even bigger and better days are ahead for all of us. So thank you for everyone's time and attention today. And I'll ask for a motion to formally close the meeting.
I think Tony wants to make that motion.
Tony had to leave. He already closed the meeting. Tony made a personal motion and acted on it.
Exactly.
All right, so I need someone present to make a motion. Thank you very much, Tracy.
Second.
Judge, you got to clean up your own mess here. Okay, thank you very much. All in favor, Ann, and on behalf of Tony, fully approved. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day. We'll see you March 21st.
Thank you.
Thank you.